Autumn in Centennial has always been my favorite season. The trees along our street turned gold and scarlet, and the air took on a piercing freshness. Lionel and I used to sit on the veranda of our house in the evenings, silently watching the last rays of sunlight color the maple trees across the street. Now I sit here alone, wrapped in his old cardigan, the one with the worn elbows, the one he refused to throw away despite all my exhortations. My name is Winifred Thorne, though everyone in Centennial knows me as Winnie. I've lived in this town most of my life. I worked in the school cafeteria for 30 years, feeding children, including my own son, and then my grandchildren. Over the years, I learned who likes mashed potatoes and gravy, and who secretly gives their carrots to their table mate. I knew each child by name and remembered their little habits. Many of them are long grown up and now bring their children to the same school where I once filled their plates. But now things have changed. Lionel left 2 months ago. A heart attack took him instantly, leaving us without even a chance to say goodbye. 45 years together, and suddenly, nothing. His chair by the TV, his favorite mug in the cupboard, his shoes by the door, everything's there, but he's gone. I look at my watch. It's 9:30 in the morning. Fletcher promised to be here by 10. My son is always precise, especially when it comes to his interests. And today, his big interest is my house. The house that Lionel and I have lived in all our lives. The house where our 3 children grew up, though 2 of them, our sweet girls Patricia and Eleanor, have long since moved away to different parts of the country and visit us, now me, only on major holidays. Only Fletcher remained, my only son, whom Lionel and I spoiled as best we could. Maybe too much. I rise from my chair, wincing at the pain in my knees. Arthritis has been my constant companion for the last few years. I walk to the kitchen to make tea. I grab 2 cups and then, on second thought, put one back. Old habits die hard. Memories of Lionel come in waves. There he is, standing at this very stove, preparing his signature Sunday breakfast. Here he sits at the table, checking his students' notebooks. He taught high school physics and was a favorite teacher for generations. His dry humor and fairness were appreciated by all. In physics, as in life, Winnie, he said, it's important not only to know the laws, but to realize when they stop working. I wonder if the laws of parental love work in Fletcher's case. I must have missed something in his upbringing. Or maybe he's always been this way, too calculating, too pragmatic. The doorbell interrupts my musings. Strangely, it's too early for Fletcher. I go to open it, fixing my hair on the way. Audrey Baxter, a friend of mine since high school, stands on the doorstep. Winnie, darling, I thought I'd stop by early so we could talk things over before your son arrives, she says, coming in and giving me a hug. Audrey has always been energetic. Even now, in her 70s, she looks 60 and moves like she's 50. After her divorce, she had a brilliant career as a lawyer specializing in family law. And although she was retired, her experience and connections were still with her. Come into the kitchen. I've just made some tea, I say, leading her into the house. Are you sure you want to do this? Audrey asks as we sit down at the table. It's not too late to cancel. I shake my head. No, I've already made up my mind. Fletcher left me no choice. You know what he's been doing the last few weeks, right? Coming here, looking at the house like he was appraising it, talking to realtors, all while I was sitting in the next room. It's like I'm gone. Audrey nods, pulling a folder of papers out of her bag. I'm all set. The house will be deeded to me, but with the stipulation that you can buy it back for the symbolic sum of $1 at any time. And the real price, $400,000, will go into an account that no one but you and me will know about. I'm embarrassed to drag you into this, Audrey. I sighed. Come on, Winnie, she said. After all you did for me when George left, leaving me with 2 little ones, who brought us food every day and babysat while I ran around on job interviews? You did. So don't you dare even think that this is a favor. It's the bare minimum I can do. I smile, feeling tears come to my eyes. Audrey and I go over the paperwork and I sign where we need to. One last signature and it's done. Legally, the house is no longer mine. And when Fletcher shows up here with the deed of gift that he's going to make me sign, legally it will be null and void. When he finds out, he'll have a stroke, Audrey says with undisguised satisfaction. He deserves a lesson, I reply quietly. I always thought Lionel and I raised him better than that. Taught him to respect his elders, to take care of his family. But something must have gone wrong. The sound of a car pulling up makes us both tense up. It's him, I say, glancing out the window. You better go out the back door. I don't want him to see you. Audrey quickly gathers up the papers, leaving me with copies, and hugs me tightly. Hang in there, honey. You're stronger than you think. And remember, I'm always in touch. Call me anytime. She leaves, and I take a deep breath, preparing myself for my son. Fletcher walks in without knocking, as if he already considers this his home. Tall, trim, in an expensive suit, he always looks like he's going to an important meeting. Mom, he nods, kissing me on the cheek. How are you today? Fine, thanks, I answer, watching him look around the room as if assessing its value. I see you haven't packed, he says with a touch of irritation. I told you I was coming to help you move. We don't have much time. What's the hurry, Fletcher? I ask calmly. He sits down across from me, rubbing his temples as if talking to me is already giving him a headache. Mom, we've been over this. You can't live here alone. You need care, supervision, and the house. It's too big for one person, and it's too expensive to maintain. You said yourself you're having a hard time paying the bills. I never said anything like that. On the contrary, thanks to Lionel's frugality, we've saved enough for me to live comfortably. But Fletcher's already made up a story in his head to justify his actions. What do you suggest? I ask, even though I know the answer. I found a great place, Pine Grove. It's a boarding house for the elderly. It has everything you need. Nurses around the clock, entertainment, socializing. You'll love it there. And the house. He pauses as if searching for words. You can sign the house over to me. I'll keep an eye on it. Look after it or sell it, I ask bluntly. Fletcher blushes slightly but quickly pulls himself together. Oh, come on, Mom. This is our family home. It's just... Astrid and I thought maybe it would be a good place for us and the kids. You know, Cyrus and Clementine's school is right next door and the house is bigger than our apartment. I nod as if in agreement. Let him think I don't see right through him. I've prepared the paperwork, he continues, pulling a folder out of his briefcase. It's a simple deed of gift. You sign it and there's nothing to worry about. The house stays in the family and you don't have to worry about bills and repairs. I silently take the folder, but I don't open it. Give me a little time to pack, I say. I can't just up and leave. My whole life is here. Fletcher looks at his watch, an expensive Swiss watch, a gift from the company for some successful deal. Okay, you've got a couple hours. I'll be back for lunch, and we'll go. Just don't take too long to get the signatures, okay? The sooner we get this done, the better for everyone. He leaves, and I'm left sitting in the kitchen, clutching the file in my hands. A storm of emotions rages inside me. Bitterness, resentment, disappointment. But strangely, there is something else too. Relief. I finally saw my son's true face, without masks or pretense. And I've made a decision. For the next 2 hours, I walk around the house, gathering the essentials. Clothes, photo albums, a few books, jewelry. I stop at the family photos on the wall. There's Fletcher in his senior year of high school, serious, ambitious. It was clear even then that he would go his own way without looking back. Here are our girls, Patricia and her husband in Oregon, Eleanor and her partner in New York. Both far away, but both call regularly. Unlike Fletcher, who lives half an hour away. I grab an old photo off the shelf. Lionel and I on our wedding day. Young, happy, full of hope. What would you do, Lionel? I whisper, looking at his smiling face. And I can almost hear his answer. The same thing you would do, Vinnie. Exactly the same. Fletcher returns at exactly the right time. He walks into the kitchen where I'm sitting with 2 packed suitcases. Are you ready? He asks, taking a look at my luggage. Is this everything? Everything I need, I answer. The rest, you can do what you want with it. He nods, pleased with my compliance. And the papers? Did you sign them? I hand him the folder. It's done. He quickly checks the signatures without reading the text. It's typical Fletcher, a superficial approach to anything that doesn't directly concern him. Great, he says, tucking the folder into his briefcase. Then let's go. I've already called the Pine Grove administration. They're waiting for you. We leave the house. I stop on the doorstep, taking one last look at my house. Lionel and I's house, 40 years of memories. Children's laughter, family dinners, quiet evenings together, tears and joys, arguments and reconciliations, everything that made up our lives. Mom, we have to go, Fletcher says impatiently, standing by the car. I nod, closing the door and walking to the car. I look back at the last moment. Goodbye, home, but not forever. I'll be back. The drive to Pine Grove takes about 40 minutes. Fletcher drives in silence, occasionally answering calls over the speakerphone. Business talk, numbers, percentages. I look out the window at Centennial floating by. The city has changed over the years, gotten bigger, more modern, but it's still the place where I've lived all my life. Pine Grove turns out to be nothing like I imagined. This is not a cozy boarding house, but rather a budget nursing home. A gray three-story building with small windows surrounded by a languid park. I don't see any pine trees, by the way. Is this it? I ask as Fletcher parks out front. Yes, Mom, he answers without looking at me. It's a nice place, safe and affordable. Within whose means? I want to ask, but I don't. Fletcher unloads my suitcases and we enter the building. The lobby smells of disinfection and something else unpleasant. A few elderly people sit in chairs looking nowhere. We are greeted by the receptionist, a young woman with a tired face and a strained smile. Welcome to the Pine Grove, Mrs. Thorne, she says as she checks our IDs. Mr. Thorne has already drawn up the necessary paperwork. Your room is on the second floor. Follow me. We take the stairs. The elevator, as the receptionist explains, isn't working today. Fletcher wrinkles his nose in frustration but doesn't say anything. The corridor is long, with identical doors on either side. Finally, we stop at one of them. Here's your room, Mrs. Thorne, the receptionist says, opening the door. Lunch is at 12:30, dinner at 6. Are there any questions? I shake my head, looking around my new place. It's a small room with a single bed, nightstand, closet, and desk. The window overlooks the parking lot. Here you go, Mom, Fletcher says, setting the suitcases by the bed. Get settled in. I'll come by in a couple days to check on you. He pauses awkwardly at the door, like he doesn't know what else to say. Don't worry, Fletcher, I say calmly. I'll be fine. He nods, clearly relieved that he can leave. I'll see you then. Call me if you need anything. And he leaves without even giving me a goodbye hug. The receptionist disappears as well, leaving me alone in this faceless room that is now supposed to be my home. I sit down on the bed, feeling the mattress sag under my weight. Outside the window, rain begins to drizzle. The droplets tap against the glass as if counting down the seconds of my new life. It's okay, Lionel, I think, looking up at the gray sky. This is just the beginning. He doesn't know who he's messing with yet. The first night at the Pine Grove stretches endlessly. The hard bed with the mattress creaked with every movement, and there were monotonous moans coming from the next room. I lay there with my eyes open, staring at the ceiling, thinking about how quickly life could change. Yesterday I was in my home, among familiar things, and today I was in this faceless room with the stale smell of disinfection and sadness. The morning began with a shrill bell in the hallway. Wake up! Breakfast in 30 minutes! The nurse shouted through the door without waiting for an answer. I got up slowly, feeling my knees aching. My arthritis was worse than usual. Maybe it was the weather, maybe it was the stress. After dressing and combing my hair in front of the tiny mirror, I walked out into the hallway. The Pine Grove dining room was on the ground floor, a large room with long tables and plastic chairs, more like a school cafeteria than the restaurant Fletcher had promised. The smell of burnt oatmeal and cheap coffee filled the space. I got in line with my tray, feeling uncomfortable under the stares of the other occupants of the house. They were all about my age or older, but many of them had that special emptiness in their gazes that comes when people stop expecting good things from life. Are you new? The woman in front of me asked me. She was short, with short-cropped gray hair and lively eyes. She looked more cheerful than many around her. Yes, I arrived yesterday, I said, trying to smile. My name is Gladys Pruitt, she introduced herself. And you are? Winifred Thorne, I answered. You can just call me Winnie. Well, Winnie, welcome to our little hell, Gladys said with a chuckle. Don't worry, it's not so bad if you know a few rules. 1. Never have pudding on Thursdays. 2nd, don't sit at the third table on the left. That's the territory of Margaret Douglas and her entourage. And 3, stay away from Derek the nurse. His hands are always cold. I laughed, feeling grateful to this straightforward woman. Thanks for the tips, Gladys. I'll keep them in mind. Sit with me, she suggested when we'd gotten our portions. Tell me how you came to be here. At breakfast, I met not only Gladys, but her friends, Eustace Higgins, a former letter carrier with a bad heart, and Miriam Lassiter, a quiet widow who used to run a flower store. They were good company, lively, humorous, and without the bitterness that was in the eyes of many of the Pine Grove residents. You can do anything here if you know how, Gladys explained to me as we sat after breakfast in what was called the lounge, a room with worn chairs and a TV set that was always tuned to a channel with reruns of old serials. For example, if you want an extra pillow, don't talk to the nurses, but to Juan from housekeeping. He's the only one who actually does anything in this place. I nodded, absorbing this information. It was a strange thing. I had worked all my life in a school cafeteria, and now, late in life, I was back in a similar atmosphere with the same unspoken rules and hierarchy. The first days at Pine Grove were spent getting to know the routine and the residents. Wake up at 7 in the morning, breakfast at 8, group activities at 10, someone knitted, someone collected puzzles, lunch at 12:30, quiet time, dinner at 6 and bedtime at 9. The monotony of the days was interrupted only by visits from the doctor on Tuesdays and the priest on Sundays. The staff varied. Some nurses were really trying despite the obvious lack of time and resources. Others just worked their shifts, not seeing us as people, just as a burden. The one who stood out was the head nurse, Shirley Braxton, a tall woman with a perpetually disgruntled face and a cold voice. "Mrs. Thorne, your pills," she said on the third day, handing me a cup of medicine. "What pills?" I was surprised. "I only have arthritis and I take painkillers as needed. It says here that you're prescribed antidepressants and sleeping pills," Shirley said, pointing her finger at a list. "Your son said you were depressed after your husband died." I felt my anger boiling up inside me. "My son has no medical training and can't diagnose me," I said as calmly as I could. "And I'm not depressed. I'm in mourning, which is normal after 45 years of marriage." Shirley pressed her lips together. "As you wish, Mrs. Thorne. But keep in mind, your son is paying for your stay here. And if you refuse treatment, we'll be forced to tell him. I only took the painkillers, leaving the rest of the pills in the cup." "Report it," I said. I have no secrets from my son. Though, of course, that wasn't true. The biggest secret of all, the deal with Audrey, remained safely hidden. For now. With each passing day, the disappointment at the Pine Grove grew. The food was bland, the entertainment was primitive, and there was no comfort. But worst of all was the atmosphere of doom that hung in the air. Many of the inhabitants had resigned themselves to the fact that they were living out their days within these walls, abandoned by their families, forgotten by their friends. "My daughter put me in here," Miriam told me during one of our meetings. "She said it was only temporary until she could find something better for me. That was 3 years ago. Now she calls once a month and comes to visit at Christmas, and not for long. And my son disappeared as soon as he sold my house," Eustace added. "He took the money and moved to Florida. He says the climate there is better for his health. For his health, not mine." As I listened to these stories, I became more and more convinced that I had done the right thing in anticipating Fletcher's actions. My son had always been selfish, but over the years that quality had only grown stronger. One evening, sitting in my room, sorting through the old photographs I'd taken from home, I came across a picture from 10 years ago. It showed Lionel standing in the garden, leaning on a shovel. It was the year he decided to start a vegetable garden behind the house. Fletcher came to visit and saw his father at work. "Why are you doing this, Dad?" he asked in bewilderment. "You could hire a gardener instead of slaving in the sun at your age." "Son," Lionel replied, wiping the sweat from his forehead, "when I work in the garden, I feel connected to the earth, with life. It gives me joy. Joy can't be bought or delegated." Fletcher just shook his head then. "You're weird, Dad. You could have had a better life all your life if it weren't for those principles of yours. Imagine how you and Mom would have lived if you'd gone to private school to teach instead of public school, or invested in stocks like I advised you to instead of keeping money on deposit. Your mother and I always had everything we needed, Lionel replied calmly. We lived what we thought was right. Not to save more, but to live a decent life and help others. Fletcher snorted. Yes, and you ended up helping everyone but yourself. I would never do that. Thinking back on that conversation, I felt bitter. Lionel didn't say anything, but that evening he said to me, Winnie, I'm afraid we failed to impart to Fletcher the most important thing of all, the ability to see value in the intangible. To him, everything is measured in money and status. He was right. And as much as it pains me to admit it, our son has grown up to be a man alien to the values in which we raised him. In 2 weeks at Pine Grove, Fletcher didn't visit me once. He called twice, short conversations during which he was more distracted by something in his office than actually talking to me. The grandchildren, Cyrus and Clementine, arrived unexpectedly. They showed up on Saturday afternoon, confused and clearly uncomfortable. Grandma, Clementine hugged me tightly, and I could feel her trembling. How are you here? Aren't you lonely? I stroked her head, noting that she had dyed her hair again, this time purple. I already have friends. Besides, I've worked with people my whole life, and I know how to get along. Cyrus stood a little farther away, tall and gangly, so much like Lionel in his youth. He wasn't as open with his feelings as his sister, but I could see the worry in his eyes. Hi, Grandma, he said, hugging me awkwardly. We brought you something. He handed me a bag that contained homemade cookies, obviously baked by Clementine, she always liked to cook with me, some books, and a warm new robe. Clem said it might be cold in here, Cyrus explained. We also thought you might miss reading. I was touched by their concern. Thank you, my dears. This is the best gift I could have gotten. We sat in the common room, as there was no room for 3 in my room. Clementine talked about school, about her art lessons, about her new friends. Cyrus was more quiet, but occasionally inserted remarks about his science projects. He clearly had a talent for physics, like his grandfather. And how was Dad? I asked cautiously, watching their reactions. The children looked at each other, and I noticed Clementine tense up. He's busy, Cyrus answered. Work and stuff. And repairs, Clementine added, biting her lip as if she'd said something she shouldn't have. What kind of repairs? I asked, even though I already knew. Cyrus threw a warning glance at his sister, but she couldn't stop herself. Your house, Grandma. Daddy decided we were going to move in there, and now he's remodeling everything. He took down the wall between the kitchen and the dining room to make an open space like in the magazines. And he also wants to turn your bedroom into an office for himself and Grandpa's workshop into a game room with billiards and stuff. I felt my insides tighten with pain and anger. The house that Lionel and I had spent decades building and fixing up was already being chopped up to his liking by Fletcher. Every corner of it was filled with memories. Everything had a story. And now it's all being destroyed for fancy open space. Grandma, are you okay? Cyrus asked worriedly, noticing the change in my face. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to calm down. Now was not the time to show my feelings. Not in front of the kids. Of course, honey. I'm just a little tired. You know, at my age, you get exhausted quickly. We can leave if you want to rest, Clementine suggested, but there was a clear reluctance in her eyes. No, not at all. Tell me more about school. And about your friends. I miss news from the outside world so much. We spent the rest of the visit talking about their lives, their plans for the future. Cyrus wanted to go to engineering college. Clementine dreamed of art school. They were so alive, so full of hopes and plans. Looking at them, I felt a surge of strength and confidence. They were worth fighting for. For their sake, I could not just give up and live out my days in this God-forsaken place. When it was time to say goodbye, I hugged them both tightly. Come again, I asked. I am so happy to see you. I will, Grandma, Clementine promised. May I call you? Of course, sweetheart. Any time. When they left, I went back to my room and sat on my bed looking out the window. It was getting dark, and in the light of the streetlights, I could see Cyrus and Clementine walking toward the bus stop. They had come by bus, not with their parents. I wondered if Fletcher knew about their visit. Thoughts of the house kept me busy. I imagined workers tearing down the walls, throwing out Lionel and me, rearranging the space that had been our refuge for so many years. And Fletcher in charge of all this destruction, not even realizing that he didn't legally own the house. I pulled out my phone and dialed Audrey's number. She answered after the second ring. "Winnie, how are you doing, honey?" "It's not as bad as it could be," I answered, lowering my voice even though no one was in the room. "But I need your help. Fletcher's renovating the house. He's tearing down walls, rebuilding everything." "That bastard doesn't waste any time," Audrey grumbled. "Don't worry, Winnie. I legally own the house and he can't make any changes without my consent. I can sue him for property damage." "No, not yet," I said after a pause. "Let him go ahead. The more he puts into the repairs, the harder it will hit him when he finds out the truth." Audrey snorted. "You're getting tough, Winnie." "Not tough," I countered. "I just learned to protect myself." Too late, of course, but better late than never. After I talked to Audrey, I couldn't sleep for a long time. My mind was spinning with thoughts of home, of Fletcher, of my grandchildren, about Lionel, who always believed in the best in people, even when they disappointed him. I wasn't sure if he would have approved of my plan, but I was sure he wouldn't have approved of what Fletcher had done. In the morning, I woke up with renewed determination. If Pine Grove was to be my home for a while, I would do anything to avoid turning into one of those extinguished souls who wandered the hallways resigned to their fate. I had a plan, and I was going to stick to it. In the meantime, I would live here as fully as I could. At breakfast, I shared with Gladys the idea of organizing a book club. "There's so little entertainment here," I said, "but lots of people have books. Why don't we get together once a week and talk about what we've read?" Gladys was keen on the idea, and by lunchtime we had 5 people ready to participate. A small victory, but a victory nonetheless. That evening, as I was unpacking from a suitcase I'd never fully unpacked, the phone rang. It was Clementine. "Grandma," she said excitedly, "you won't believe what I saw today. Daddy brought in the designer and they were discussing how to redesign the garden. Dad wants to remove your apple tree and rose garden to make a barbecue area and a hot tub. The apple tree that Lionel and I planted the year Fletcher was born. The rose garden that has been my pride and joy for over 20 years. "Thank you for telling me, sweetheart," I replied, trying to keep my voice calm. "Don't worry, everything will be fine." After the conversation, I stood at the window, looking out at the Pine Grove parking lot. Old cars, cracked asphalt, stunted trees planted for the appearance of caring about landscaping. It's a place where unwanted relatives are dumped, like old furniture in a thrift store. Nothing, I thought. Things will change soon. Fletcher thinks he got rid of me and got the house, but he doesn't know yet that he's really lost both. Rainy days at Pine Grove were especially dreary. The monotonous clatter of drops on the windowsill, the gray sky outside the window, the muffled voices in the hallway, all of it brought back memories. And memories at my age are a dangerous thing. They can be warming, but they can also drag you down into the abyss of longing for something you can never get back. I sat in the chair by the window, going through the old photos I'd grabbed from home. Here was my wedding to Lionel in 1977, me 20, him 24. I'm in a simple white dress my mother made. He's in a suit borrowed from his older brother. We're both smiling like we have an eternity of happiness ahead of us. We met at Centennial College. I was studying home economics, not because I wanted to, but because it was the only thing my parents could afford. Lionel was a physics major, a thin, serious young man with glasses who often sat in the library late into the night. Our first meeting was in the cafeteria where I worked part-time. He ordered a coffee and a sandwich, and when I brought the order, he started telling me about a book he was reading, something about quantum theory. I didn't understand a word of it, but his enthusiasm was so infectious that I couldn't help but smile. "I'm sorry," he said, suddenly embarrassed. "I'm probably boring you with my chatter." "Not at all," I replied sincerely. "It's just that it's not every day you meet someone who's so passionate about what he does." After that, he came every day, always sitting at the same table, always ordering the same sandwich. And a month later, he asked me out on a date to the planetarium. There, under an artificial sky studded with stars, he took my hand and said, "You know, Winnie, there are billions of stars and probably billions of planets in the universe. But I'm sure there's no one like you anywhere." That was the most romantic phrase I ever heard him say. Lionel was not a master of beautiful words or spectacular gestures. He was reliable, honest, sometimes naively straightforward. But behind that simplicity was a depth I'd been discovering all the years we'd been together. We got married after he graduated. He got a job teaching physics at Centennial High School. And I dropped out of college to work full time. Dreams of higher education had to be put on hold. I had to help Lionel while he settled into his new place. I told myself I'd go back to school later. But then Fletcher was born, followed 3 years later by Patricia, and 2 years later by Eleanor. And my own ambitions dissolved into a cycle of diapers, childhood illnesses, and household chores. Lionel was always there for me. "Winnie, you can go back to college whenever you want," he'd say. "We'll manage. I can help more with the kids." But I could see how tired he was after a long day at school, how he brought home notebooks that he checked late into the night, how he can carve out an extra hour to play with the kids or help them with their lessons. And I couldn't add to his worries. When Eleanor turned 5, I took a job in the school cafeteria. It wasn't the most prestigious job, but it allowed me to be close to the children, have the same schedule as them, and contribute to the family budget. I started out as a regular worker, but over time I worked my way up to cafeteria manager. It was a demanding position, designing menus, overseeing purchases, managing staff. As the children grew up, Lionel and I tried to instill in them the values we thought were important: honesty, hard work, respect for others, appreciation of simple pleasures. We were not rich, but we never felt poor. Our home was always full of books, music, and interesting conversations. We had family dinners where everyone could talk about their day, share successes or problems. Patricia and Eleanor absorbed these lessons. They grew up motivated, yet sensitive to the needs of others. Patricia became a teacher like her father, and Eleanor became a social worker. Both found their own path that allowed them to not only make a living, but to make the world a little better. Things were more complicated with Fletcher. He was our firstborn, and maybe we spoiled him too much. Or maybe it was the fact that he was special from childhood, smart, ambitious, with a fierce sense of self-worth. At school, he was always the best student, winning Olympiads, heading the school council. We were proud of him, but sometimes I worried about the ease with which he used people to achieve his goals. "Lionel," I said once when Fletcher was 16, "don't you think Fletcher is a little too calculating for his age?" My husband looked at me thoughtfully over his glasses. "I know what you mean, Winnie, but maybe it's not such a bad thing. The world is changing. Maybe people like him are better suited to the new realities. But shouldn't we teach him that there are more important things than material success, caring for others, sticking to principles?" "We do, Vinny, every day by example. But at the end of the day, everyone makes their own choices. And Fletcher made his. After college, he began a career in banking, rising quickly through the ranks. He married Astrid, a beautiful, ambitious woman who shared his desire for success and status. They bought an apartment in a prestigious neighborhood, drove expensive cars, vacationed in exotic countries. And with each passing year, the gap between our worlds grew wider and wider. Lionel never criticized his son's choice openly, but I noticed how he frowned when he listened to Fletcher's stories about his latest acquisitions or bargains. He was particularly hurt when Fletcher suggested he invest his retirement savings in some dubious investment fund. "Dad, you could double your capital in a year," he urged. "Why keep your money on deposit at a ridiculous interest rate?" "Because I prefer to sleep well, son," Lionel replied. "And because there are some things that money cannot measure." "Like what?" Fletcher grinned. "Like knowing that you've earned every cent honestly, or knowing that your actions didn't hurt others." Fletcher rolled his eyes, the way he used to do when he was a kid and thought his parents were talking platitudes. "Dad, that all sounds noble, but it's not very practical. In today's world, you have to be tough to survive." "Tough but not cruel, Fletcher," Lionel said quietly. "That's the difference." After this conversation, relations between them became cooler. Fletcher came less often, called only on holidays. Lionel never complained, but I could see how it hurt him. "We should have done things differently, Winnie," he said one evening as we sat on the veranda. "Somewhere we made a mistake with Fletcher." "We did the best we could, Lionel," I replied, taking his hand. "We loved him, gave him everything we had. We set an example for him, but we can't live his life for him. And now I'm sitting in Pine Grove going through these memories like old photographs and thinking about how strange life is. I gave up my ambitions for my family, devoted myself to my children, my husband, my home, and now, at the end of the road, I find myself here, in a room with the furniture, surrounded by strangers. But even here, in this dreary place, I found something valuable: friendship. Within a month at Pine Grove, our little book club had grown to 10 people. We gathered twice a week in the recreation room, discussing what we had read, sharing life stories. It was our little island of normalcy in a sea of routine and hopelessness. Gladys became my closest friend. Her straightforwardness, sharp mind, and inexhaustible energy inspired me. We often sat in the garden, if you could call a piece of land with a few benches a garden, watching birds and discussing plans. "You know, Winnie," she said one day, "I've been thinking about our culinary situation. The food here is disgusting. You used to work in the school cafeteria, didn't you? Why don't we talk to the administration about having a home cooking day? Once a week, maybe. You could do the menu, and we could help with the cooking." I'm really excited about this idea. I've always loved cooking, and I've missed it here. And the rest of Pine Grove could use some variety. Surprisingly, the administration agreed to the experiment. Perhaps it was the fact that I hinted at the possibility of a complaint to the nursing home inspection authorities about the quality of food and general conditions. Anyway, we were allocated time in the kitchen on Sundays. The first home cooking day exceeded all expectations. Gladys, Miriam, and I, and a few other enthusiasts prepared a real Sunday lunch: roast, mashed potatoes, fresh salad, and apple pie for dessert. The smell of home-cooked food spread throughout the building, and even the residents who usually preferred to eat in their rooms showed up for lunch. "This is the best thing I've eaten in 3 years," said an old lady whose name I didn't even know, so withdrawn and unsociable was she. The success of our culinary experiment gave me a strange sense of satisfaction. It was as if I was useful again, doing what I did best: caring for others. That same evening, when I returned to my room, the bell rang. It was Fletcher for the first time in a long time. "Mom," he said without preamble, "I'll come by tomorrow. We need to talk." "Of course, son," I replied calmly. "I'll be waiting." Fletcher arrived in the afternoon when most of the Pine Grove residents were resting in their rooms. He looked tense, wearing an expensive suit, his hair perfect, but with a shadow of worry on his face. "Mom," he said, hugging me awkwardly, "how are you doing?" "Not bad," I replied. "I've made friends, organized a book club. Yesterday we even had a home cooking day. I cooked like the old days." Fletcher nodded, but I could tell he wasn't particularly interested in my news. "It's good that you've adapted." Yeah, Astrid and I were worried. "Were you?" I asked with a touch of irony. "I thought you were too busy fixing things up to worry about me." He flinched, and I realized I'd hit the mark. "Is that why you're here? To tell me how my house is coming along?" "Our house, Mom," he corrected me. "You signed the deed of gift, remember? I own the house now." "Yes, of course," I nodded. "How could I forget? So what's going on with the renovations?" Fletcher relaxed, thinking I'd accepted the situation. "It's going great. We've completely remodeled the first floor, removed the wall between the kitchen and dining room, as you've probably heard from the kids. We replaced all the plumbing, put in new kitchen appliances. Next month, we'll tackle the second floor and the garden." "What are you planning to do with the garden?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer from Clementine. "Oh, there will be a relaxation area with a barbecue, a jacuzzi, maybe a small pool. Astrid wants modern landscaping, no old-fashioned flower beds or fruit trees." "So my rose garden and apple tree will have to go?" I clarified, watching his reaction. Fletcher hesitated for a moment. "Well, Mom, it's all maintenance. And the apple tree is too old. It could fall over in a storm. It's a safety issue." "Of course," I agreed. "Safety first." We were quiet for a moment. Fletcher was clearly uncomfortable, avoiding my eyes. The truth is, Mom, I didn't just come here to tell you about the repairs. There's something else. Yeah? I raised my eyebrows. You see, when we were sorting things out in the closet, we found Dad's coin collection. Did you know it existed? I nodded. Of course I did. Lionel collected coins all his life. It was his hobby. So, I consulted an expert, and it turns out that some of those coins are quite valuable, especially that series of silver dollars my dad bought in the 80s. What do you want to do with them? I asked, even though I already had an idea. Well, I thought I might sell them. You need the money to keep them here in Pine Grove. And we're putting so much into fixing up the house. I felt my insides boiling with anger. Lionel loved that collection. He had collected it for decades, carefully preserved each coin, cataloged it, studied the history of each piece. He wanted to pass it on to his grandchildren, especially Cyrus, who had an interest in numismatics. Fletcher, I said, trying to speak calmly, this collection belonged to your father. He wanted it to stay in the family so that Cyrus would continue to add to it someday. Mom, be realistic. Fletcher rolled his eyes. Cyrus is 16. What's numismatics? He needs a proper computer to study, clothes, tutors. It all costs money. And it costs money for you to be here, too. I thought you were using my pension to pay for Pine Grove, I said. It should be enough. Fletcher blushed slightly. Yes, of course. But there are other expenses. Medicines, for instance. What kind of medication, Fletcher? I only take painkillers for my joints and then occasionally. You know, just in case. At your age, you never know what you might need. I've decided to stop this farce. Fletcher, listen to me carefully. Your father's coin collection is not for sale. It must stay in the family. If you need money for repairs, use your own. After all, this is your home now, as you said yourself. He pressed his lips together. Mom, you don't understand. Those coins are just sitting there dead weight when they could do some good. Benefit who, Fletcher? You? Your bank account? I shook my head. No, that's my final word. The collection stays in the family. You can't decide that, he flared up. The house is mine, and everything in it is mine, too. Not everything, son, I said quietly. Not everything. He looked at me, puzzled and annoyed, not knowing what I meant. But I wasn't going to explain. It wasn't time yet. Well, he finally said, standing up. I can see we're not going to have this conversation. I hope you'll think about my offer. I will, Fletcher, I said. And you think about what I said. He left without saying goodbye. I watched him get into his expensive car and drive away without even looking back. That evening I called Audrey. How are things going? I asked after an exchange of greetings. Everything is going according to plan, she replied. I've already prepared the paperwork. As soon as you tell me, we'll start the process. I think it's time, I said, remembering my conversation with Fletcher. He'd already taken over Lionel's coin collection. Who knows what'll happen next? Are you sure? Audrey asked. It'll be like a nuclear bomb. There'll be no turning back. I closed my eyes, imagining our house, the rose garden, the apple tree, everything Lionel and I had spent years creating, and Fletcher, who was going to destroy it for his idea of modern comfort. Yes, I said firmly. I'm sure of it. It was time to show Fletcher that some lessons were learned the hard way. It was the second month of my stay at Pine Grove. Fall was slowly giving way to winter. The trees were bare of their branches, and the morning frost was coating the puddles on the asphalt with a thin crust of ice. It was colder in our break room, the heating was malfunctioning, and many of us sat wrapped in plaids and cardigans. I woke up that morning with a feeling that something was going to happen. I don't know where the feeling came from, maybe from a dream I couldn't remember, or from some elusive change in the atmosphere. But it did not leave me as I washed and dressed and went to breakfast. Gladys noticed my mood as soon as I sat down at our usual table. What's wrong, Winnie? She asked, sliding a cup of tea toward me. You look like you're expecting a visit from the tax man. I smiled weakly. I don't know, just a feeling. Good or bad? Eustace asked, trying to cut something on his plate that looked like an omelet on the menu, but was more like a rubber mat. More like decisive, I answered after a pause. Like before a thunderstorm, when the air smells like ozone and everything freezes in anticipation. Gladys snorted. You're quite a poet, my friend. You're a poet. Let me know if you've got a problem and Eustace and I will be there for you. I nodded gratefully. In that time, Gladys and Eustace had become more than just neighbors in misfortune. They'd become my new family, the support that kept me from falling into despair and self-pity. After breakfast, I went back to my room. There were no activities planned for today, just a day like any other day, which is most of the time at Pine Grove. I was about to read the new book Clementine had brought on her last visit when the phone rang. Winnie, it's Audrey. My friend's voice sounded excited. Fletcher had just received the notice from the court. The papers were handed to him in person at the office, can you believe it? In front of all his coworkers. I felt my pulse quicken. How did he react? I have no idea, but I can imagine. The notice informed him that I legally owned the house and demanded that he stop any construction work under threat of an additional damage claim. I closed my eyes, imagining Fletcher, my always so confident son, standing in the middle of the office with papers in his hands, not knowing what was going on. Do you think he'll come? I asked. I'm sure he will, Audrey replied. Get ready for the storm, and remember, I'm on your side. I thanked her and hung up. A strange calmness swept over me. After weeks of waiting, planning, doubting, the moment of truth had finally arrived. The cards were open, and now all that remained was to play the final round. I was not wrong in my expectations. Around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, a nurse knocked on my door. Mrs. Thorne, you have a visitor, she said. Your son, he's, very insistent on seeing you. I realized from her tense face that very insistent was a mild way of saying that Fletcher had probably made a scene at the door. Thanks. I'll be right down, I replied, rising slowly from my chair. Fletcher was waiting for me in the small visitor's room on the first floor. He was pacing back and forth like a caged tiger, his face red with anger and his hair disheveled. Not at all like the impeccably dressed and combed man I was used to seeing. Mom, he exclaimed as soon as I entered. What the hell does that mean? He shook the papers in front of my face, the court notice he'd received that morning. Hello, Fletcher, I said calmly, sitting down in the chair. Please don't yell, the walls are thin in here. Don't yell? He almost gasped with indignation. I'm getting some crazy notice that our family home belongs to Audrey Baxter, your friend. That you signed a deed of gift for her the day before you signed it for me. That I must cease all work and vacate the premises immediately. And you're telling me not to yell? Exactly, I nodded. Sit down, please. We need to talk like adults. To my surprise, he obeyed, sinking heavily into the chair across from me. His hands trembled as he placed the papers on his lap. Explain, he demanded in a quieter voice, but still with rage in his voice. What does it mean? It means exactly what it says on the notice, Fletcher, I said. The day before you brought me here and made me sign a deed of gift for you, I signed another one for Audrey. Legally, she owns the house, which means your deed of gift is invalid. He looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time in his life. But, why? Why did you do it? I don't understand. You don't? I shook my head. Fletcher, you came to see me 2 weeks after your father's funeral. You didn't even give me time to mourn him. You immediately started talking about how I couldn't live alone, how the house was too big, how I needed supervision. And then you brought me to this place. Not to that cozy boarding house you promised, but to a cheap nursing home where they save even on heating. You took my home, my independence, my dignity. And you thought I'd just accept it? Fletcher turned pale. I did it for your own good. You can't live alone in a house this big. You need nurturing, care. No, Fletcher, I interrupted him. You did it for yourself, for your comfort, for your bank account. The house in Centennial is worth a lot of money, especially after the renovations you've done. And me. I've become a burden you've decided to get rid of in the easiest way possible. That's not true, he exclaimed, but there was a twinkle of guilt in his eyes. I care for you. I'm paying for this place. With my money, Fletcher, I corrected him gently. My pension and the savings that your father and I have been saving all our lives. You haven't spent a dime out of your own pocket. He was silent, unable to find the words to contradict me. But that's not all, I continued. I have to tell you that the house wasn't just signed over to Audrey. It was sold to her for its market value, $400,000. That money is now in an account that only she and I know about. Fletcher's eyes widened in shock. What? But, but it's my inheritance. You had no right. Yes, I did, Fletcher. The house belonged to me and your father. After he died, it belonged to me, and I had every right to use it as I saw fit. But what about family? What about tradition? He looked really confused, as if his whole worldview was crumbling before his eyes. What traditions are you talking about? I asked bitterly. The tradition of respecting your elders? To take care of your parents? Valuing family heirlooms like your father's coin collection that you were going to sell? Fletcher lowered his head. What happens now? He asked after a long pause. Will Audrey evict us? We've already spent so much money on repairs. That's up to you, I answered. Audrey is acting on my instructions. I can ask her to give you time to find a new place, or we can discuss the terms of the lease if you want to stay. Rent? He looked up at me in disbelief. You want me to pay rent for a house that was supposed to be mine? That's fair, isn't it? I remarked. You were going to leave me to live here on my own money, while you yourself would live in my house for free. Fletcher jumped up, getting angry again. I won't stand for it. I'll challenge this deal in court. You were in mourning, out of your mind. You can try, I said calmly. But keep in mind that Audrey is a former lawyer who specialized in family law. She knows all the loopholes and pitfalls. Plus, we have a medical opinion that I was completely sane when we signed the papers. We anticipated that reaction, Fletcher. He stood there clenching and unclenching his fists as if he didn't know where to put his rage. What's Astrid going to say? I suddenly asked. And the children, do they already know? He turned even paler. No, I called Astrid when I got the notice, but I didn't go into details. Said there was some kind of mistake with the deed to the house. A mistake? I raised an eyebrow. No, Fletcher, it's not a mistake. It's a consequence of your own actions. We stopped talking. It started to rain lightly outside the window, the drops tapping against the glass, providing background music for our drama. I have to go, Fletcher finally said, standing up. I have to talk to Astrid and decide what to do next. Of course, I nodded. Just remember that you don't have much time. By law, you must vacate the house within 30 days, unless otherwise agreed. He looked at me with a mixture of anger and disbelief. I don't recognize you, Mother. You've never been so tough. People change, Fletcher, I replied, especially when they have to defend themselves. He left without saying goodbye, leaving me alone in the visitor's room. I sat there for a long time, staring out the window at the drizzling rain, feeling a strange mixture of emotions, the satisfaction that my plan had worked, the bitterness that it had come to this, and the quiet sadness of knowing that things with my son would never be the same again. That evening, I received a call from Astrid. Her usually confident voice sounded tense and a little frightened. Winnie, it's Astrid. Yeah, I wanted to talk to you about what's going on. Hello, Astrid, I replied. I assume Fletcher told you about the situation with the house? Yes, she said quietly. I don't understand why you did. We're a family. We wanted what was best for us. Did you? I asked softly. You didn't even ask me what I wanted. You decided everything for me, where I should live, how I should live. You took my house, my things, my memories. And you call that what's best? But Fletcher said that you agreed to, she began uncertainly. Because I didn't have a choice, Astrid. Or at least that's what Fletcher thought. But I've always taught my children that there are always choices, and I made mine. The children are very upset, she said after a pause. Especially Clementine. She cried when she found out we had to move out. I felt a pang of guilt. Clementine had always been a sensitive child, and the thought of me hurting her was unpleasant. I'm sorry for what happened, I said sincerely. But you don't have to move out right away. We can discuss terms under which you could stay, such as a reasonably priced lease. Fletcher will never agree to that. Astrid sighed. He's very proud, and he's very angry right now. I know, I replied. But sometimes we have to swallow our pride for the good of the family. It was one of those lessons that Fletcher never seemed to learn. After talking to Astrid, I called Audrey to tell her about my meeting with Fletcher. As I suspected, he's furious, I said. He's threatening to sue, to contest the deal. Let him try. Audrey hummed. The paperwork's perfect. By the way, there's something else you should know. My friend at the bank told me that Fletcher had already used the house as collateral for a renovation loan. He filed a deed to the property. But that's... I hesitated. Fraud? Yeah, that's right. Providing false information to get a loan is a serious offense. The bank has already launched an internal investigation. I closed my eyes, feeling my insides tighten. I wanted to teach Fletcher a lesson, to show him the consequences of his selfishness, but I didn't want to ruin his life. What happens now? I asked. That depends on the bank, Audrey replied. They might just demand immediate repayment of the loan, or, in the worst case, refer the matter to law enforcement. But don't worry, Winnie. If it comes to that, we'll find a way to help him, provided he apologizes and admits his mistakes. Thank you, Audrey, I said. I don't know what I'd do without you. The same thing you always do, she said confidently. Find a way to cope. You're stronger than you think, Winnie. After I talked to Audrey, I sat at the window for a long time, watching the dusk fade over Pine Grove. A strange sense of satisfaction filled me. Not gloating, no. I wasn't glad for Fletcher's troubles. Rather, it was a sense of justice restored, of regained control over my own life. My son thought he could control my fate, my possessions, my memories. He thought I was a weak, helpless old woman to be sent to live out my days in oblivion while he enjoyed the fruits of my and Lionel's labor. But he was wrong. I didn't know how things would turn out. Whether Fletcher would want to reconcile, whether he would admit his mistakes, whether he would change. But I knew one thing. I would no longer let anyone, not even my own son, decide my life for me. I had come too far to end up a mute shadow in a nursing home. I still had the strength, the will, and enough wisdom to stand up for myself. And that knowledge filled me with a quiet but deep satisfaction. The news of what had happened to Fletcher after our confrontation came to me piecemeal, like the pieces of a mosaic gradually coming together. Clementine called first, her voice shaking with a mixture of emotions. Grandma, something terrible is going on at home. Dad is always yelling on the phone. Mom is crying. They think I can't hear, but the walls are thin. I felt a pang of guilt that my grandchildren were caught up in this situation, but I reminded myself that I didn't start this war. What's going on, honey? I asked gently. Daddy's getting a call from the bank. Something about a loan and false information. And yesterday, some people came by with some documents. Daddy locked himself in his office and didn't come out until this morning. I got the details from Audrey. The bank where Fletcher took out the loan against the house had launched an internal investigation. Finding that he had provided false information about the property, they not only demanded immediate repayment of the loan, but also notified the management of the bank where he worked. This is serious, Vinny, Audrey said. For someone working in finance, a fraud conviction can mean the end of a career. I didn't feel happy about Fletcher's troubles, but I didn't feel sorry for him either. He had made his choice when he decided to send me to Pine Grove and take possession of my home. Now he was reaping the rewards of his actions. I learned from Astrid that they had to move out of the house within 2 weeks. The bank had frozen their accounts during the investigation and they were struggling to make ends meet. We're moving in with my parents, she said in a lifeless voice. Temporarily, until things settle down? What about Fletcher? I asked, trying not to show my concern. Suspended from work while the investigation is ongoing. Sitting at his computer all day, looking for legal loopholes to challenge your deal with Audrey? He's changed a lot, Vinny. He's hard, he's angry, always talking about betrayal and ingratitude. I sighed. Fletcher had always been stubborn. Even as a child, when he'd made a mistake, he'd have made a complicated excuse rather than admit his guilt. That trait only seemed to have gotten stronger over the years. A month after the dramatic events, I was sitting in Audrey's office signing the foreclosure papers. According to our original agreement, I could buy it back for the token sum of $1. The rest of the money from the sale, $400,000, had already been deposited into my personal account. There, Audrey smiled as the last signature was signed. The house was yours again, Winnie, legally and factually. I felt tears come to my eyes. Thank you for everything, Audrey. I couldn't have done it without you. Yes, you would have. She patted my hand. You've always been stronger than you thought you were. It's just that sometimes we all need a little help from our friends. Moving from Pine Grove back home was both joyful and sad at the same time. Joyful because I was finally leaving that dreary place, returning to the walls that held so many memories. Sad because I was parting with people who had become close to me over the months. "Don't you forget us, do you hear?" Gladys said sternly, hugging me goodbye. "And don't forget us," Gladys said sternly, hugging me goodbye. Not for a while, of course, but for an hour, for tea and gossip. "I will," I promised, squeezing her dry palm. "And you come to my place. We'll have a real dinner, not like the soup here." Eustace, usually reserved, was also emotional. "Take care of yourself, Winnie," he said, patting me awkwardly on the shoulder. "And know that you've given a lot of people here hope. Showed that even at our age, you can fight and win." The day I left, almost all the residents, those who could walk on their own or with the help of walkers and sticks, gathered at the entrance to Pine Grove. They waved to me as the cab drove me away from this place that had become the final resting place for many. The house greeted me with silence and emptiness. Fletcher and his family had already moved out, leaving behind traces of their hasty escape, forgotten things, empty boxes, trash. The renovations they'd begun were still unfinished, broken walls, uncovered floors, exposed wiring. The sight was depressing, but worst of all, many things I valued were gone. Lionel's coin collection, photo albums, his old notebooks, my cooking recipes passed down in the family. Fletcher must have taken it all with him, either out of revenge or as his rightful possession. I stood in the middle of the trashed living room, feeling tired and frustrated. Had I really come home only to find it in ruins? The doorbell rang, interrupting my gloomy thoughts. Cyrus and Clementine stood on the doorstep, both with backpacks over their shoulders and uncertain smiles on their faces. "Grandma," Clementine threw herself around my neck, "we found out you'd come home. We wanted to help you get settled." "We brought a few things," Cyrus added, pointing to the backpack. "What we could salvage when my parents were packing." Inside the backpacks were the treasures they'd saved, a few photo albums, a box of coins from Lionel's collection. Not all of them, but a good portion. My old recipes wrapped in plastic files so they wouldn't get wrinkled. "We couldn't take everything," Cyrus said in an apologetic tone. "Dad was watching our every move, but we tried to keep the most important things safe." I hugged them both, unable to hide my tears. "You are my saviors," I said. "The most important treasure is you. The rest is just stuff. They can be replaced." We spent the afternoon sorting out the mess and planning what to do next. Clementine, with her artistic taste, offered ideas on how to restore the interior. Cyrus, technically savvy, inspected the wiring and plumbing, making notes on what needed to be fixed first. "Daddy said he wouldn't let us come over anymore," Clementine confided in the evening as we drank tea in the kitchen. "But we'll still come. We're old enough now to decide for ourselves." "I don't want to cause trouble between you and Father," I said carefully. "You're not the one causing trouble, Grandma," Cyrus replied seriously. "Daddy's the one who messed it up. Clem and I aren't blind. We saw what was going on. What he did to you. It's wrong. And the way he's acting now is wrong too," Clementine added. "He blames everyone around him. You, Audrey, the bank, even Mom. Everyone but himself." I sighed. Fletcher had always been like that, unable to admit his mistakes, always looking for fault in others. "Give him time," I said. Maybe when the first anger passed, he'd understand. But deep down, I didn't believe it. Fletcher was too proud, too stubborn. It was easier for him to continue to see himself as a victim than to admit his guilt. In the weeks that followed, the house slowly came back to life. With Audrey's help, I found a good contractor to finish the renovations, fixing everything Fletcher had screwed up. The gardener was restoring the rose garden, which had been partially destroyed. Fortunately, they hadn't had time to cut down the old apple tree. It was still standing in the corner of the garden, preparing for its winter hibernation. Cyrus and Clementine came every weekend, helping with the repairs, just spending time with me. Sometimes they would stay overnight, and then the house would be filled with laughter and conversation again, just like old times. There was no word from Fletcher. According to his grandchildren, he had found a job with less pay and prestige, but still a job. He and Astrid rented a small apartment and, by all accounts, had fallen on hard times. He still can't get over what happened, Clementine said. Every time your name comes up, he either leaves the room or starts saying horrible things. Don't mind him, I said. Anger is a bad counselor. One day he'll understand. But then again, I didn't really believe that. Some wounds are too deep to heal completely. Some bridges, once burned, cannot be rebuilt. One day, while sorting through old things in the attic, I found Lionel's diary, a small black book he kept in the last years of his life. Leafing through it in the evening, I came across an entry dated shortly before his death. Worried about Winnie. What will happen to her when I'm gone? The girls are far away, and Fletcher is too caught up in his own ambitions to really care about his mother. He only sees us, our house, our things as material possessions, not realizing that the true value is in the memories, in the love, in those invisible threads that bind a family together. I hope I'm wrong. I hope when the time comes, he'll do the right thing. I closed the journal, feeling my heart clench. Lionel had seen what I'd refused to acknowledge all these years, Fletcher's selfishness, his inability to appreciate what money couldn't measure. Was what I'd done fair? A question I asked myself over and over in the quiet evenings sitting by the fireplace in the restored living room. Maybe I should have talked to Fletcher sooner, explained my feelings, tried to get through to him. But then I remembered how easily he'd decided to get rid of me, how quickly he'd begun to remodel the house for himself, how he'd planned to sell Lionel's coin collection. And I realized, no, it wasn't unfair. It was necessary. Sometimes people need to experience loss to realize the value of what they had. Cyrus once asked me if I regretted what happened. Do I regret losing my son? I asked him again. Yes, of course you do. Do I regret protecting myself and my dignity? No, not for a second. He nodded, understanding. You know, Grandma, he said thoughtfully, I think Grandpa would be proud of you. He always said he respected people with principles. Thank you, honey, I replied, squeezing his hand. It means a lot to me. Spring came to Centennial early and warm. The roses in my restored garden were budding, and the apple trees were in full bloom. The house had been renovated, not in the way Fletcher had planned, with its open spaces and fashions, but with respect for its history and character. I was sitting on the veranda enjoying the morning sunshine and a cup of tea when I saw the mailman approaching the house. Among the usual bills and advertisements was an envelope with unfamiliar handwriting. Inside was a short note and a check. Mother, this is the first installment of the money I owe you for repairs. I do not apologize, nor do I expect you to forgive me, but I acknowledge my debt and intend to pay it. Fletcher. No, with love or sincerely yours, just a signature. I stared at the note, feeling a strange mixture of sadness and satisfaction. It wasn't reconciliation, not even close, but it was an admission, however minimal, however forced, that he was wrong. I didn't respond to the note. I put the check in my desk drawer, not going to cash it, but not throwing it away either. Maybe someday it would be a conversation starter. Or maybe it wouldn't. Life went on. I resumed my culinary experiments, renewed acquaintances with old friends, started attending community events in Centennial. Sometimes I visited Gladys and the other residents of Pine Grove, bringing them homemade baked goods, fresh flowers from the garden. Each time I left the place, I felt grateful to fate that I had been able to escape. One evening, sitting on the veranda and watching the sun go down, I thought about all the turns my life had taken, about the decisions I'd made, right and wrong, about the sacrifices I've made for my family, about how I finally learned to stand up for myself. Was I happy? Not always. Was I fulfilled? Yes, definitely. I lived on my own terms in my own home, surrounded by people who truly cared about me. I knew my worth and didn't let anyone, not even my own son, dictate how I lived my life. And in that, perhaps, was justice, not in punishing Fletcher, not in recovering material losses, but in gaining control of my own life. In the freedom to decide my own destiny, despite age, despite loss, despite everything. The sun dipped below the horizon, coloring the sky in shades of pink and gold. I breathed in the cool evening air, filled with the scent of the blooming garden. A new chapter of my life was just beginning, and I was ready to write it myself, in my own words, according to my own rules.